Ugh. Hang on, I'm setting my shit up. What's up? Hello. Oh, what's going on, gentlemen? Is that a real gun? Yes. All of them are. I would put out more. Actually, I probably should put out one more, just for shits and gigs. But I gotta move it, because God forbid it's seen. What? Yes, it's real. No way. Yes way. It's almost like in America you can have these things. There you go. Really? Yes, really. It's almost like I collected things. Yeah. They are all real, I promise. Alright. Okay. Interesting. Anyways, if you got questions, you can ask anything gun related, and you can interrupt what I'm doing. But I'm just going to keep reading because it's kind of what I've been trying to get through. Basically, what I'm reading is the report of the M7 rifle that was issued out by the Army captain not too long ago. Hang on, let me read this up. Because in my opinion, the M7 was a really bad choice. And I kind of want to go over why. But the only way to really go over why is reading it. So, anyways. Right now we're talking about basically World War One. So, understanding the need to suppress enemy positions to enable maneuver, the Army sought to equip infantrymen with weapons that would enable local fire superiority. New light machine guns, such as the Browning automatic rifle, along with foreign-made guns, were introduced in greater numbers. And by foreign-made guns, they're talking like the Show Shot or the French Bernet Merci, all like light machine guns, portable in quotes, light machine guns. And basically, the dominant one, it's funny, everyone thinks the BAR came out in 1918. It saw almost like no combat use in World War One. It pretty much was, it came in the last couple months of the war, and the war ended before it even got some real combat use. Which, whatever, that sucks. The most common light machine gun that was used in World War One was the show shot, the CSRG 1918 or 1917. 16? Whatever. But it was chambered in 8mm Lebel, or there was a US variant that was in 30-06 that used like full magazines. So, in terms of World War I and fire superiority, it came from either heavy emplaced machine guns like the Vickers guns. There's really nothing else, because World War I was a stalemate warfare that kind of I would have never wanted to be in. But anyways, I'm kind of annoyed how he referenced the BAR, because it was only used for like 2 fucking months in World War I, where the several other foreign-made guns I think should have probably got mentioned more, because they were used far more. The Army recognized that individual riflemen also needed more firepower. And then he's going to talk about, okay, the experimental Pedersen device converted the bolt-action 1903 into a semi-automatic rifle that was able to use quick-detach, high-capacity magazines. Now, yes, the Pedersen device, basically, you pulled out the bolt. I have a 1903 over here, but I can't mess with it on a live stream, or I'd let you guys see it. But on a 1903, you pull the bolt out, and it was only on the 1903s prior to the 03A3, which I have a 1903A3, which doesn't have the Pedersen cut, so I can't show you that part. But basically, you pull the bolt out, and then it would show there would be a cut on the far side of the chamber. So like here's the whole bolt. There's a cut here, and it's literally just this tiny little hole, and then there's clips for a magazine, and you would hook in like a 32 round or like 20. It was a high 30 something round magazine of 32 ACP that you'd shove into a 1903, and then they'd have a semi-automatic pistol caliber carbine. That was like the first pistol caliber carbine, was the Pedersen device. And let's see, finally the United States could give an infantry a tool that would enable fire superiority. Even against fortified enemy positions, which bullshit, it shot pistol calibers. That thing wasn't suppressing much. It was for in the trench killing or close combat. Testing the Pedersen device results so promising that several 100,000 were ordered. Still, the Pedersen device was a complex conversion of a bolt-action rifle that served as an interim solution. And World War I ended before the full impact of adopting semi-automatic capable service rifle could be observed. Now, there were semi-automatic service rifles in World War I, but they didn't start seeing full service until basically the last year of the war, which the most frequently used one in World War I was the, I'm drawing a blank on the name, it was the French RSC 1918. It was the semi-automatic 8mm Lebel, and it looked, if I could afford one, I would buy one just to have for the channel, because I think that gun is fucking cool. And I would love to show it off and shoot it, because it looks steampunk, it looks cool, and it just has like a giant bump under the rifle, and you just pull it open, shove in a stripper clip for a Berthier, which I'll let me show you. So, how the 1918, I only have 4 rounds in this, don't ask why. I lost one. But, no, I need to clean this. So like, here's a clip for what would be this 1918. And it would have 5 rounds, just like this, and I wish I could play with guns on here. I don't even have it, but it would be cool to show. You'd pop the magazine open, and you would just shove this whole clip in, close it, rack the charging handle, and you had 5 rounds of 8mm Lebel, which this isn't a real round, this is just a dummy round. But this is 8mm Lebel, which not the best round in World War I would say. It's very awkward to stack because it's got a rim and it's got this huge taper. So basically, when you try to stack them, they don't start touching until there. So stacking anything more than 5 rounds was impossible, which is why when you look at the CSRG 1918s, the show shots, it would be 18 rounds is pretty much 20 rounds is all you could fit in the magazine of that light machine gun. It was more of an automatic rifle. But that's as many rounds as you could fit, which was kind of a shame. Because if they just, I argue, probably reshape the 8mm label a little better, you probably could have fit more rounds in there. And whatever. The French are the French, and that's why they lose wars, and not us, right? So, yeah. Annoying that he references BARs. But, anyways. Was a semi-automatic rifle we were talking about. Beginning in 1919, studies were conducted by the Ordnance Committee to take lessons from World War I and use them to develop new weapons for the infantry. The War Department signed on J.D. Pedersen, the guy who invented the Pedersen device, to help create the desired outcome of an effective semi-automatic rifle. One of Pedersen's first concerns was the standard-issued ammunition from the older M1903s and 1917s. The 30-06, while 30-06 had performed admirably in bolt-action rifles, was a relatively large cartridge that produced high amount of heat and recoil and chamber pressure, which I have a 30-06. I can show you the 30-06. So, 30-06 is this big honking round, which, for reference, I can show you. I kicked it. Sorry. Here is our current rifle round that the U.S. military uses. So, like 30-06, which is the standard issue round from like World War I on, to 5.56, which is the standard issue round today. And I have pretty big hands, but there's a massive size difference, right? So, anyways, 30-06. So basically what they sought to do right after World War I was get rid of the 30-06 and change it to 276. It said while it was a relatively large cartridge, it produced a high amount of heat, recoil, and chamber pressure. Pedersen used studies from Europe to conduct internal ordnance testing to then develop the ideal ammunition for use in a new rifle, which he concluded that a rifle chambered in 7mm would have the optimum mechanical and tactical effect. We knew this back in, when was this? 1919, that 7mm was the ideal trade-off, like the ideal caliber for long-range performance, ballistic capability, and weight and tolerance, right? And yet we still don't use it, which I can understand needing lighter rounds. That makes way more sense than what we currently do, which is just have half and half. So, like, even before that, we have this book, The Hatcher's Notebook, which, if you're ever bored and want to read a lot, highly recommend this book. But basically, this is a book where Julian S. Hatcher is a major general in the Army, and his entire job was to work at the Ordnance Department and test weapons, which I would kill to have his job. And basically, he talks about he goes over the brief history of it. This is over the 1903. We've got plenty of reference photos. He goes into detail of like production years of the 1903, which kind of coincides with this report where he was talking about in World War I. This is how we do research for videos, by the way. So, 1917, Here we go. Fewer than 600,000 rifles were ready for service at the outbreak of the war. So if you look, 1907 was the first production year of the 1903, which ironic, but whatever. Serial number produced at the start, 1,239,641. Oh, wait, no, this is 1922. So 269,000 were made. 1908, 1909, 1910, 11, 12, 13, 14, and what year? The war started in 1914. So there's 570-ish, if we count 1915, there's about 595,601 rifles were produced. 1903 Springfields were made before World War I. And then, as you can see, these production numbers, 1916, 620,000, 17, 632,000, which is kind of a shame. They only managed to produce 12,000 guns in a year of war. And then you can see, like 1918, right when we start getting involved, we upscale from 632,000 to 761,000. And then 1919, after the war, we end up hitting the million mark and produce 1,555,000 1903s. And then you just watch these numbers kind of taper off in the interwar period, because we're in the 20s. And all of 1920, we barely produced 100,000 guns. And then 1930 to 1935, we only produced 100,000 guns. Which is, I get it, because right at the end of 1935, they start tooling up for the M1 Garand. So, that makes sense. Talking about barrels. This is the 1917. But we were talking about the Pedersen device, so I kind of want to go back. Oh, yeah, we were talking about the Pedersen device, but if you guys have questions, you're more than welcome to ask and interrupt. You can ask anything even not related to what we're talking about, and I'm happy to answer it. I'm just kind of ranting because I can, and there's no one else to listen to me. These are all just diagrams of semi-automatic attempts. This is a this is the first semi-auto rifle that was designed before the M1 Garand. It was his first semi-automatic primer-actuated model built in 1920, and it used 30 caliber. And it even used magazines back then, which is kind of interesting given how it ended up not needing a magazine at all. Around the 19, I think I passed the Pedersen device. This is machine guns, which we'll get into machine guns a little bit later. Oh, so here's the show shot I was talking about earlier. This is a 8mm Lebel, and it uses a semicircular magazine. It holds 30? No, it doesn't. It holds 28. I think it was 28, and that was on a good day. These magazines were known for being shitty in the trenches of World War I, and they never worked. But this gun looks sick, and I kind of want one. If I could ever afford it. But this is a Hotchkiss. They never really were popular. And now we're starting off with the BARs, which he mentioned the BAR in the report. And if you didn't know, this is the first model of the BAR prior to any of the modifications that was made. The BAR A1 for World War II that has like the bipod and the magazine wings and everything. This is the original BAR, which I think is way sexier than the A1. But whatever. This is the Japanese, nope. French, 7.5, nope, that's later. Now we're talking about machine guns. Oh, here we go, semi-automatic rifles. Johnson rifle, nope. Remington Model 8, that was used in the war, but never ended up being in large-scale production. Alright. I won't lie, I totally forgot why I was doing this. But guys, if you have questions, ask. Anything gun related. I have literally an arsenal of books to reference if you want references. But for now, highly recommend Hatcher's Notebook. I'll leave it here. I know I was talking about calibers. For anyone who was paying attention, you can probably remind me. But we were talking about, oh yeah, the ideal caliber. And since you guys are watching, what's the ideal caliber of a service rifle for a military? Tell me what you think, because the U.S. Army deems they want to replace the 5.56, which we're using now, for, I don't have a 277 Fury. Well, 277 is basically 7mm, right? Because 276 is 7mm, so 277 is just 0.001 bigger, so it's 7mm. I don't have any 7mm. Actually, yes, I do. Let me take that back. I do have 7mm Mauser. Okay, so we have, here's how slight differences there are in these kind of calibers back in World War I. These are World War II era calibers. This is 7mm Mauser, right? And this is 8mm, 7.92, which is, they round up to 8 because whatever, they're German. The difference is only in, basically, they're almost identical, but they can't shoot each other, right? And then we add the US 30-06, still the fucking biggest at the time, right? Compared to today's caliber issue 5.56, which is pretty nuts that the US military went from 30-06 to 7.62 by 51, which is 308. So here, I'll actually show you the differences in US calibers, but I just wanted to show you the 8 and 7mm. So let's grab a 308. Here we go. All right. So all these are full metal jackets. So we have 30-06, which was World War I era issue, right? This was the standard U.S. caliber from World War I until, what, end of the Korean War, beginning of Vietnam. Even though it was still issued, it was not for that purpose. And then we swapped it out to the 7.62 by 51 and or the 308. You can see the size difference. And then we switched from the 308, which we still currently use in machine guns, but to the 5.56. So we've downscaled a lot over the years. But the upside is you can carry far more 5.56 than you can 30-06. And as it was referenced in the report, most engagements in military conflict happen in 300 meters or less. So 5.56 is capable out to 500 in good conditions with good rifle and good barrel length and good ballistics. Where, I mean, shit, you can shoot a 30-06 to 1,000 if you have a good rifle, if not further. And 308 has a more of a ballistic drop-off, right around 800 to, if you shoot right, you can shoot 1,000. I've shot 1,000 with a 308, but it's just harder. Yeah. Come on, I know you guys got glaring questions. And then this is 7.92, 7.92, 8mm. This is 7. That works. All right. So Pedersen concluded that 7mm would have the optimum mechanical and tactical effect. Small caliber would cause less recoil, pressure, and heat inside the rifle. Additionally, a smaller size of the new round would enable troops to carry more quantities of ammunition without carrying more weight, which is basically what we do nowadays. The current loadout is 210 rounds at a minimum if you're in the U.S. military going out on a combat mission. Typically, we would always carry more. I would carry as many as I physically could, which was sometimes in like the 400s, 400 round count. So you're carrying 6 magazines, 1 in the gun, that's 7, and then you'd shove anywhere you could. You'd have more in your bag. You'd have 6 more in your backpack. You'd have a couple in your pockets. Like, you would carry as many mags as you could because, as this report even states, fire superiority matters far more than anything else ever could. You can give me 10 rounds and I'd be useless compared to giving me 400 and I'm just laying fucking down 8. So, these advantages would translate to giving infantry a weapon capable of suppressing enemy positions with lightweight, and that would enable faster movement as well. Also true. But they also switched it to, yeah, you have a lighter weight rifle and lighter weight ammunition, but we're going to bog you down with fucking 100 pounds of gear that make you less maneuverable than you are. I understand ballistic protection is necessary, but there is a trade-off between being bulletproof and being able to move. And that's the part where me personally, like, front and back plates I'm all down for, and a helmet, but the side plates and the groin protectors and the neck protectors and the shoulders and your fucking ass protector, it's all a waste. I understand that it can save lives, I get it, but it's just as dangerous to be immobile and in an urban environment, you know? If you disagree, tell me, but I personally think I'd rather just have a lighter front back plates and that's it, and go out than having a fucking, what's that suit in Call of Duty, the fucking Juggernaut suit? I would rather not, you know? The Army conducted wound ballistic testing to verify on a variety of caliber options for new rifles. Chambered in 256, 276, and 30-06 were tested against anesthetized pigs at ranges from 100 to 1,000 yards, known as the pig board tests. So, basically, back in the 1928, we just lined up hundreds of pigs and shot at them with guns for random, all from distances 100 to 1,000 with different calibers to see which one was the most lethal. And honestly, that sounds kind of fucking gangster. It's almost like the when they tested handgun calibers and they used cows and they just kept executing cows with various handgun calibers to see which one, you know, would be a first round kill, which they ended up determining 45 ACP was the caliber that could kill a cow with a single round to the head, where none of the other calibers could. That's why we adopted 45 ACP instead of 9mm back in, 1911, the early 1910s. The results concluded that the smallest caliber of 256, which is 6.5, so like 6.5 Creedmoor, I think that kind of caliber, that kind of round. Which I had a 6 Creedmoor, I don't have a 6.5, unfortunately. But 6.5 was the most lethal at 300 yards and below. In contrast, 30-06 excelled at retaining energy at the furthest range of 1,000 yards. Ultimately, the compromise between the two was chosen, and the new service rifle would be chambered in 276, or 7mm. So, we learned back in the 1928 that the optimal caliber was 7mm back then. And I can see why that makes sense. And 30, it's literally this difference. If I had to, this is 276 and this is 30-06. So, I can see the difference, don't get me wrong. There is a size difference, and while not much, when you stack up a couple hundred rounds, there's going to be some difference, you know? But, years of development followed, resulting in the selection of a rifle designed by John Garand, the M1 Garand. And it was originally chambered in 7mm. The M1 Garands were supposed to be 7mm in 276 Pedersen. But just as large-scale production was set to commence, the Chief of Staff of the Army said, fuck no, right? General Douglas MacArthur was concerned with the then ongoing Great Depression and budget constraints that were followed as a result, believing the use of 30-06 stockpiles was more budget-friendly, which than implementing a wholly new caliber. Yes, I agree. Why not use what you already have stockpiles of? And that's kind of the argument of why the M7 sucks now, because we have billions of 5.56 in reserve. Why would we start making a brand new caliber when we're kind of staring at global conflict in some places? So why would you risk switching your entire manufacturing base at a time where it's kind of decisive, basically just like now, or like we're talking about? So the Army new semi-automatic rifle would retain the older 30-06 cartridge, despite clear data showing that the advantages of smaller calibers. So, we already agreed that 7mm was the best, but the U.S. Army pulled an army and said, fuck you, we're rocking 308 because it's what we got, and you're going to make it work. What else is new in the U.S. military, right? The Garand rifle was configured to 30-06 and introduced as the U.S. rifle caliber 30 Model 1. While an excellent rifle, American soldiers have been denied a weapon of greater lethality to carry to the next conflict. And that is a really solid question that I wish kind of could have got not tested, because that would have been a shitty way to do it, but a question I would have loved to have seen answered is, would have the 7mm M1 Garand been more capable than the 30-06 M1 Garand? That would have been pretty interesting to see. And they kind of had the opportunity to try. They still could have probably rolled out a small batch of the 7mm and gave them enough ammunition to last, for a while and see how they perform in theater. And that would have been pretty cool to see. But Army being Army, fuck no. We're going to stick with what we know, right? So into World War II, the dramatic operational and strategic and tactical advantages of the new technologies can unleash were on full display the moment World War II broke out. No longer constrained by the speed of troops on the march, infantry could be carried into combat on mechanized vehicles or even being dropped from the sky out of airplanes, which, fuck that. The positional trench fighting of the last war had been replaced with battles of maneuver. The German Wehrmacht entered Poland in 1938 carrying carbine-length rifles, submachine guns, and light machine guns in every infantry squad. The amount of firepower each German squad could generate was significant in comparison to squads from armies that held fast to full-length rifle caliber rifles. So basically, what is that? Soviets, or they invaded Poland, and then like Finland and all that. So Finland was using Mosin Nagants, which they still fucking clapped the Russians back then. But shorter rifles, more machine guns, more maneuverable squads outbeat the standard old-school World War I trench fighting method 7 days a week. By 1942, German forces were finding themselves bogged down in close-quarters combat of the Russian front. The majority of German infantry were equipped with bolt-action carbines, which were accurate at distance but slow to operate. Equipped with a greater proportion of compact submachine guns, Russian troops were better suited to close urban and forest fighting from their German counterparts. So basically, Russians were clapping Germans because in urban combat they had the PPSH 41, which, do I even have that book? Here, I have a book. Ian McCollum, right? This one's Ian's, right? I think so. Who wrote this one? Yeah, Ian McCollum wrote this fucking awesome book, and it's called The Small Arms of World War II. Which, you're right, it was chambered in 7.62 by 25 Tokarev. But I just wanted to show what a PPSH was, right? So, handguns, 1911s. We don't care. We're looking for submachine guns. Here's a Thompson. Oops, hang on. Y45 ACP. There we go, that's better. Thompsons. This is a Riesling. I've shot one of these. They're fucking fun. They're really interesting too. I don't know why they are not as popular, but they're fucking cool. Paratrooper model of the Rieslings. Curved barrel prototype. Interesting. Turning handle. This is a grease gun. Is this only the U.S. service rifles? I think it is. Sorry. I thought it was... Oh, sorry. United States Small Arms World War I. Might be. I got a different book. So let's try this book. I've collected many over the years, but this is more antique, older stuff, but we'll see if I can find it. Flintlock, don't care. Bazookas, don't care. This is more modern stuff. This is like, here we go. Oh yeah, that was fate.
Here's a PPSH. PPSH 41. This one. And this is a Lanchester. Stens, Beretta Model 30s. But here, PPSH 41 is what we're talking about. So, PPSH 41 could rock a 71 round drum magazine, or it can rock those 32 round stick magazines. Compare that to the Car 98Ks and the MP40s, which, fuck that. I would prefer a PPSH over an MP40. And I've shot a couple PPSHs and I've rebuilt one off a parts kit, and those things clap. They're fucking light. They're worth their time. They're worth their money. If you ever could get a parts kit for a PPSH, which it's still a fucking machine gun, so, you know, watch yourself. But highly recommend shooting a PPSH at 41 if you can, because they're kind of cool. And the ejection port's on the top, so when you do shoot, the rounds kind of come straight up top, and it's kind of fun. Yeah. Hold on. Doubling back to whatever the fuck I was reading. Alright. Oh yeah, German forces finding themselves bogged down in close quarter combat. All that fun stuff. Russian troops are better suited for urban and forest fighting than their German counterparts. Also true. Yeah, let me get my papers out of the way. German small arms engineers set out to resolve the main drawbacks of both rifle and submachine gun. The rifle is more accurate at distance, with larger calibers than those used by submachine guns. And, let's see, the shitty pistol calibers weren't effective past a few hundred meters, which, yeah, you can't use a fucking handgun round out in, you know, forest combat, but they still tried back in the day. Hang on. So, basically, in 1944, the Germans created the STG-44, or the Storm Rifle, which, let's see if I can find it. Centerfire rifles, Mausers, self-loading pistols. Hey, I got one of those. Really? Right there. Browning high power. Hey, got one of those. And guess what? C96. Not the same one, but that's an Astra, but got one of those. Self-loading rifles. Here we go. This is an STG-44. If you didn't know. But the Germans had generated a leap forward in the development of small arms using a shortened version of a regular rifle round. The new STG-44 7.92x33 caliber provided the bridge between the rifle and submachine gun. So, 7.92x33, right? 7.92x33. So basically what they did in the factory was they took this 8mm Mauser round, 7.92 by, I forget what it's by. It's like I have a handy dandy caliper tool to tell me. So how they measure cases is they will measure them right there. 7.92 by 56, give or take. 57. And then that they did is they chopped it down to 33mm. So they chopped it to, let's call it right about there. They chopped it to that short. And then they necked it down again, basically in the same taper they did here, and put the same projectile on it. So, still shooting a big honking bullet, but they shorten it to about there. This new type of arm has since been dubbed the assault rifle. The STG-44 was controllable during fully automatic fire, while still being accurate enough to engage targets at distance. Further, it utilized a detachable 30-round magazine, which were easily carried in bandoliers and pouches. This enabled each infantry squad to generate a significant volume of fire without needing for lengthy belts of ammunition that would be expected of a traditional machine gun. And then the Soviet Union quickly realized the benefits of this new class of weapon and began their own assault rifle program, which resulted in the AK-47, if you didn't know. But this is on a heavy... Oh, here's a show shot. Madsen. And we got... This is a Drycy, which fucking never really were used that much. Spandau. This is like a more World War I era. Maxims, World War I era. MG08, 18, World War I. Vickers, Berthier, this is more World War II. Beretta Model 30, World War II. Brand gun. Japanese Type 11. That one's kind of cool. It uses a hopper, and you just throw stripper clips in, and it just eats stripper clips as a light machine gun. It'd be pretty cool to actually have one of those. When the United States entered the war in 1941, the semi-automatic M1 Garand was the Army's standard issue rifle. Initial concerns that a semi-automatic would waste too much ammunition or prove too unreliable in harsh conditions were found to be false. So that was the big argument everyone had back in like World War II, World War I, was like, why would you use a semi-auto? Bolt action's fucking way better. They don't jam, they don't nothing. But the M1 Garand being built the way it was with the gas piston, it was fucking perfectly reliable in almost any warfare, any kind of environment, which kind of shut up all the... What would be a boomer in World War II? I don't even want to know. If you got something, that'd be a really good joke. Because I guarantee you they didn't say okay boomer back in World War II. Initial concern here. The initial concern was that semi-automatics would waste too much ammunition or prove too unreliable in harsh conditions. In theaters of fighting, the rapid-firing M1 proved to be vastly superior to the Axis's bolt-action weapon. Pretty sure that's common fucking sense, but hey, whatever. George Patton described the M1 Garand to be the greatest battle implement ever devised, which, yes, did happen. However, American weapon engineers realized the same rifle submachine gun gap as their German counterparts. The American solution to this was the M1 carbine, a relatively small rifle using a short 30 caliber carbine round, designed for use with support rear echelon troops. The M1 was popular and effective in its intended role. However, they didn't share many revolutionary characteristics of the STG-44, which, comparing an STG-44 to an M1 carbine is like comparing a fucking pistol to a rifle. It's fucking stupid. That argument's dumb. So, like, for those that can't, I don't know, let's see if there's an M1 carbine in this book. But M1 carbines were actually a really good solution to a problem that they were having, which was rear echelon troops need to get issued a gun still, but why would we issue them they're not going to give them M1 Garands because they're needed in the front. So they had to find a solution rather than giving them old bolt action rifles or wasting guns that deserve to be on the front line. So what they did was they invented, basically, I would argue the first, not the first, but it's a semi-auto carbine that's like the intermediate cartridge. It wasn't a rifle, it wasn't a pistol, it had it was 30 caliber, but it was like a short, stubby pistol round. And let's see, these are all broken receivers from him blowing up guns, which I'm jealous of. Strength of military rifles, experiments. These are all M1 Garand stuff. Pedersen device, Pedersen rifles. Semi-auto rifle. STG-44, MP40. Got everything else. Christ. I already went through this part. Alright, never mind. Whatever. M1 carbines. Oh wait. It's almost like we have this book. So. Revolvers. Ooh, I have one of these. Also dope. Liberator pistols, sheet metal pistols, Thompsons, not what we're looking for. Reislings, also cool. M2, M3A1 grease guns, T29, 42, 1903. I have one in there, but I just can't show it on a live stream because that would get me pulled down. This is a sniper rifle. Looking for the M1 carbine here. Should have just looked in the glossary, shouldn't I? M1 carbine, boom. So M1 carbine is what we're talking about right now. So in his report, he's arguing the M1 carbine was not good compared to the STG-44, which no shit. This is a small semi-automatic carbine where the STG-44 was an entirely different caliber, bullet design, everything else. So here you go. M1A1 carbine, this is a paratrooper model where it's literally got a skeletonized stock. This thing is the size of... I'm trying to give a good comparison. Can't really think of anything funny. But here's the M2. This is a full auto M1, which is kind of fucking gangster. But whatever. Anyways. Sorry, if you haven't noticed, I have ADD, so if I can't keep myself on track, you can yell at me all you want. The conclusion of World War II brought with the beginning of the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies. By 1947, the Soviet Union had created the answer to the German assault rifle, the AK-47. Building upon the lessons of the STG-44, the AK-47 would go on to become one of the most iconic firearms of all time. No shit. Everyone knows what an AK-47 is. I even have one back in the safe here. The U.S. Ordnance Department failed to see the leap in capability represented by the assault rifle and chose to remain with the proven M1 Garand as America's service rifle. The two diverging paths of development would have disastrous consequences of the American warfighter and conflicts that would follow World War I. And yes, I agree, but I don't think it started to show face until Vietnam, because honestly, like, Korea was, I'm not going to say a continuation. It was the earliest Cold War war. But, here's the Vickers. Or Lewis gun, sorry. I don't think Korea has much of an impact because it was still too early. So, as he describes, the 1950s saw the breakout of the Korean War, greater proliferation of atomic weapons, and the start of the space race. Despite the incredible pace of technological advancements all over the world, the United States made minimal changes to the infantry's small arms or tactics. The M1 Garand of 1938 vintage remained in service until 1958. And even then, it still saw limited service until 1965, which I can't imagine using a semi-automatic M1 Garand in 1965 when, yeah, at that point, the AK-47 was fucking everywhere. Which is pretty kind of like, I'm not going to call it sad, but I can't imagine in Vietnam being handed M1 Garand saying, all right, go out there and get them. You got me fucked up, dude. So here, let's find the AK real quick. Early machine gun, smokeless powder. Hey, I have one of these. Still on machine guns, machine guns, machine guns, machine guns. Artillery. Artillery is out of my wheelhouse. Modern era. AK-47s. There's one. Here's an AK-74. CZ-58. AK-47. Boom. So, here's an AK. For those of you that don't know. Let's see. The Ordnance Department sought to replace the M1 Garand with a weapon capable of replacing almost every class of infantry arm in the inventory. This new weapon would need to replace the M1 rifle, the M1 carbine, and the BAR. So it need to replace the M1, the M1 carbine, the BAR, and the M3 submachine gun. But what caliber should this new weapon use? And then the Ordnance Department had a huge variety of data to sift through in order to make this decision. Intelligence on Soviet development of the AK-47 with its short 7.62x39 cartridge was available, along with information on its predecessor, the STG-44.
Furthermore, other allied nations in the newly founded NATO had conducted their own extensive studies of new service rifle calibers. Notably, Britain concluded that 280 7mm by 43 provided the perfect balance between speed and power, which Britain came to that conclusion in the fucking 50s when the US came to that conclusion in 1928, prior to World War I, or World War II. The new British cartridge was also suitable for use in rifles and machine guns alike, simplifying logistical concerns, which makes sense. Having a universal cartridge in that way, where it can be both a machine gun caliber and a service rifle caliber, makes total sense. And I think that would have been interesting to see that being adopted, NATO standard, having just one caliber for everything. But one caliber can't do everything. That's the downside. Once you make a universal tool, that universal tool can't do it all, and then you just start to see all the faults that come with it. You know? Despite the abundance of evidence in favor of smaller projectiles, the Ordnance Department insisted on the use of .30 caliber again. The reasoning for the decision was a belief that smaller projectiles cannot be used to make tracer, incendiary, or armor-piercing specialty ammunitions. Which, that's a fucking lie, because 5.56 has all of that and then some. There's 5.56 armor penetrators, there's AP rounds, there's hollow point rounds, there's regular full metal jackets, everything. So back in the 50s, the US military did we're worried that smaller calibers can't hold the shit we want, which is a total lie. So I'd be curious to see what kind of corruption came to that conclusion. The desired caliber was a slightly shorter version of the existing 30-06, resulting in 7.62 by 51, which I have for your viewing pleasure. Sorry. That's not even the right one.
So, what we have here is 308, 30-06, for those of you that missed it. So we switched from 308 to 30-06, which it's one of those, I get it, but also fuck you at the same time. If you're only going to shove this much out of the gun, or drop this much weight, why not keep the 30-06? But U.S. military, right? You know what I'm saying? Where was I? 7.62 by 51. A tremendous amount of political turmoil. NATO adopted 7.62 by 51 as its official standardized caliber in 1953. So this became the first NATO caliber ever. 308. 7.62 by 51. The desire for NATO to standardization did not end with just ammunition. There was a desire to equip the West with a common rifle as well. Several nations submitted designs for consideration, but ultimately two final contenders were the Belgian FNFAL, which goated rifle. Let's see if I can find it. Light machine guns, self-loading pistols. We're looking for. Cool. Hunting rifles, fuck hunting rifles. I'm looking for battle rifles. AKAR, self-loading. Here's an FAL. This is the first prototype, but so comparing here, FNFAL L1A1. This is the one the British adopted. So basically, this one versus the M14, which is what the U.S. military ended up adopting. I'm having technical difficulties. Hold on, I'm gonna have to flip this. The screw on the inside of this ain't working no more. Cool. Sorry. When the wife demands information, you must give. second difference between the FAL or this one, the M14. FAL was so successful in its trials against the M14 that the Belgian delegated to the United States. Hold on. Belgians basically said during these trials that fuck you, America, go home. The M14 sucks. The FAL is way better. However, due to a litany of internal politics, the artificial rigging of testing conditions, the United States chose the M14 as its new service rifle. The decision was so widely rejected that no other NATO army adopted the M14. Many ultimately chose the higher performing FN-FAL instead. So, U.S. military, being the U.S. military, rigged the trials to benefit the M14 to make it look better than it actually was. Which just goes to show that it doesn't matter how good something is, it just matters whether the right people are paid off to make things work. And that kind of sucked, and that really set us back a long way. Because if we went into Vietnam with the FN-FAL instead of the M14, I honestly think we probably would have stuck with a 308 rifle for probably until today. But I don't know, history's history, we'll never know. But it would be interesting to see, or what you guys think, if we adopted the FAL instead of the M14 in this trial, how do you think the rest of history would have played out? So, let me know. Tell me what you think. Robert over here thinks he got the caliber right, which he did. So, what do you guys think? Let me know. Let's see. The M14 rifle was mechanically similar to the M1 Garand rifle it replaced. It was basically the exact same operating system. Primary differences included the new use of 7.62 by 51 or 308 and a 20-round detachable box magazine, which, yeah, cool. The ability for it to fire on a fully automatic setting, which never ended up being useful in the fucking slightest, which kind of sucks. Yeah, here's Vietnam. The M14 was extremely difficult to control in its fully automatic setting, even in the prone position. The heat and pressure generated by the M14 when firing on fully automatic restricted the quantity of rounds that could be fired sequentially. Critically, this could mean it could not function in the capacity of a light machine gun, let alone a submachine gun. Both requirements that the ordnance had set for themselves. The proponents of the M14 argued that the importance of long-range aimed fire justified these compromises. So, basically, just like in the 1903 to the M1 Garand change, there's a whole bunch of boomers that said the old way is better, when the old way is definitely not better, right? Having a semi-automatic long-range aimed fire rifle is great for like one capability, but in conflict and in combat, the amount of rounds you can put down range before the other guy matters far more than making a well-placed shot. So, shocker, corruption rules the day, right? Individuals believe that marksmanship at distances is what wins firefights. The lessons of fire superiority learned in the blood of the world wars had not been taken to heart, which is very true. And a damn shame that a lot of people died all for the U.S. military to go, yeah, but we think this is better. Where was I? There was problems with producing and implementing the M14 that by 1961, a report on the issue was conducted by the Senate Armed Services Committee. The chairman of that committee, John Stennis, identified that the development of the M14 had started back in 1945, but production took until 1959, which I wouldn't give that much credit because development can take years. So to say, oh, it's fucking their fault because they started in 45.
development can take a long time. And it should take a long time, and it's a shame that even taking as long as they did, there was no benefit. Even in 1961, he acknowledged that the total requirements for the program will not be satisfied for several years. Kind of sounds like the M7. Pressure was particularly high due to the Berlin crisis of 1961, during which investigative committee reported that troops assigned to bolster our defenses in this key area were in fact equipped with World War II era M1s rather than the modern M14. Rounding out the problem with the M14 were quality control issues so severe that the congressional audit found 40% of delivered rifles should have been rejected. 40% of rifles manufactured for frontline service were defective. I can't imagine doing that as a company, like producing that product for the U.S. military and then just thinking you can still keep going. Like, how the fuck does that make sense? But government corruption and political favors play a huge hand in almost anything that the U.S. military does. So, what else is new, right? By 1965, regular U.S. troops were committed to combat in Vietnam. Embroiled in controversy and beset by manufacturing problems, the M14 would be the rifle that they unfortunately had to carry into battle. The M14 had endured almost 2 decades of lengthy development, testing, and procurement problems. In contrast, the rifles sent to the North Vietnamese and their communist guerrilla forces had already been well refined. By 1965, over 3 million AK-47s have been produced in terms of derivatives and their original. Both Soviet Union and China produced hundreds of thousands of these rifles to the Vietnamese forces provided. The disparity between the M14 and the AK-47 in both quality and tactical function became quickly apparent. No shit. The M14 was too lengthy for use in urban and jungle environments. It was very prone to rusting and swelling because a wood stock in a fucking jungle environment is a stupid idea. But I get it, back then that's all they had. Polymers and plastics weren't as prolific as they are now. So severe this uncontrollability that 90% of the M14 rifles were permanently altered to be semi-automatic only. So basically the fact that they wanted this gun to replace everything, including a light machine gun and a submachine gun, was completely disabled in 90% of possibilities, which is, again, the whole point of this gun was to do it all, and they keep pulling out the reasons that it can do it all, which is fucking ridiculous. That meant that in firefights with NVA or Viet Cong, American troops were reliantly solely on light machine guns for fire superiority, so the M60. Not very light. That's a medium machine gun, not light machine guns. There were no light machine guns in Vietnam. The lightest it got was the M60. Given that the M14 was evaluated on static target ranges instead of under realistic combat conditions, it's little wonder that troops were outgunned. Again, no shit, we kind of saw this one coming, but we were too clogged up in the political bullshit to make a right decision for the people on the ground, which is still an issue to this day. The Battle of Ya Drang had started 2 days earlier, November 14th, 1965. The 5-day engagement marked the first major clash between the NBA and American soldiers. The 1st Air Cavalry Division was airlifted to LZ X-ray carrying the modern, futuristic M16. Finally, we're in the modern day, right? Made of aluminum and plastic, it weighed almost 3 pounds less than the M14, while also being 5 inches shorter. The caliber was even more of a departure. The M16 used 5.56 by 45 millimeter ammunition, significantly lighter and faster than the M14's 7.62 by 51. So we have 7.62 by 51 and 5.56. So, hold on. That's the difference between the two calibers that came to be. M14 to the M16. So in terms of size and weight, the difference is incredibly palpable.
I think, forgot the grain weights, but this is a 55 grain projectile, and I'm pretty sure this is like 120. So you're carrying half the weight, less case capacity, less ammunition. Jormingo Tbilisi. What's that, man? Yeah. So basically Vietnam comes around and we switch from, here, let me actually find you a 7.62 round. Oh, God damn it. God damn it. Hold on. There we go. So, all right. Now that since we're talking about Vietnam, here's an AK mag. This is not what we had in Vietnam, but AR mag. Chop it a little bit, 20 rounds. We switched from 308 down to 5.56, and then this was going shit. Sorry, people. Did my precious question not go through? I think that YouTube is deleting it. Oh no, your previous question did not go through. What is it? Compare that to what we have against one another. U.S. versus, this was Vietnam back at the time, right? So more comparable, right? 7.62 by 39, 5.56 by 45. But Jormingo Tabashi, what your question did not come through. The last person to make a comment was Robert. So, and let's see. I've been looking at all of it. Nothing's come through. Find a better way to phrase your question, because apparently if they're deleting it. All right, well, while we wait for Tabishi's question, Tabishi? Jormingo Tabashi. I'm going to say Tabashi. While we wait for his question. Despite the greatly decreased projectile size, the M16 by all accounts a lethal weapon system. Despite never having before seen combat, 1st Cavalry Division was victorious at Ya Drang. Lieutenant Colonel, what is the best combat zero for this system? Which system are you referring to? The AK, the AR, M14, RBR? Which one are you talking about? Even in general, if you want to talk about combat zeros, what is it? The Marine Corps AK. Shit. I forgot the math, but there is actually a math problem where you can see, because as bullets fire, they don't fire straight. Well, they do fire. Bullets don't fire straight. Bullets fire not in an arc. They're designed to fire in an arc based on how the sights are set up. But like, for example, let's use this real quick. I hope this pen can write. There's such a thing as called a zero distance. So like, you have like, this is a horrible drawing, and I'm sorry because I'm trying to draw it the right way. But here's your AK. Barrel here, but your sights are here, and your line of sight eventually intersects with the path of your bullet, right? So the whole point of a zero is you adjust the distance of your zero so that this intersect happens at different lengths. So as the bullet comes out and it drops over time, the intersection here and further down intersect. And I think for an AK, your combat zero range is hang on, I have an AK-47. Iron sights are set to, I think it's 50. Even then, I think 50 to 36 would be optimal. 25 if you're like constrained to a range. But if you're talking about zeroing with red dots, I don't know. I'd zero mine at 25 or 50. I'd probably do 25. Okay. Ooh, single shot breech loadings. I got one of those. Cannons. You can legally own a cannon if you're in the United States. If you're everywhere else, fuck you. Manual operating repeating rifles. Got one of those too. Alright, the M16 began life as the AR-15, or the Armalite 15 rifle. Armalite rifle model 15. Not assault rifle 15 like all the fucking libs think it is. The brainchild of legendary arms designer Eugene Stoner. This weapon represented a significant jump in technology from previous designs. Made of aircraft-grade aluminum and modern plastics, the AR-15 at the time used a 20-round aluminum box magazine of 5.56 by 45. Again, this one. The choice of caliber was a result of extensive testing and lethality at distances out to 500 meters, combined with historical analysis of previous small caliber studies. So, even though they already had the answer at 7 millimeters, they went from it being lethal to 1,000 to it being lethal at 500. So I can see why they needed to come to a different conclusion. Outright rejected by the Army Ordnance Department, the AR-15 was adopted by U.S. Special Operations in 1961 and the Air Force in 1964 as the M16. General Westmoreland requested for 100,000 M16s for use in Vietnam at the cost of significant backlash from the Army Ordnance. Their own M14 had already battered by political turmoil, was threatened with extinction at the hands of a weapon that they did not create. So the political bureaucracy got mad that we realized that their shit was fucking gay and we need something that actually works, and they threw a fit. Which, what else is new with government bureaucracy and bullshit at the time? But in January of 1963, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara ordered the halt to M14 production and the directed adoption of the M16 for general service. So the SecDef literally had to come in and say, cut all your bullshit out, the M14 is gay, we're switching to the M16. Like, end of story, suck it the fuck up, right? Finally. The Ordnance Department continued to fight against this change, taking several steps that would... Hang on. Come on.
Yep, the Ordnance Department took several steps that would greatly harm the reliability of the M16. Several changes were made from the original M16 design against the advisement of its creator, Eugene Stoner. Foremost of these changes were use of ball-type propellant in the ammunition compared to that produced for the M16. Alright, hang on. Let me reread this so it makes fucking sense. The first change that the U.S. Ordnance Department did was they changed the type of powder.
So they went from ball powder, let me rephrase. They switched to ball-type propellant in the ammunition because it was easier to mass produce, but it was not intended for the rifle. So, ball-type powder, which, here, I'll show you. I have a book for this shit. Gunpowder. So, there's different types of powders. Here's this is bulk powder. Sorry, people. Ball powder. Here it is. So, a development of the Western Cartridge Company was this great service rifle, or ball powder. As has already been stated, the ordinary tubular grain rifle or pistol powder is made of paste or colloids, which is squeezed through what's known as a macaroni press. This produces tubes of powder that are cut to length by revolving knives as the tubes come through the die presses. After being extruded and cut, the grains must then be dried. Following a brief description of the manufacturer, ball powder was written by Lieutenant Colonel Commander blah 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 blah. They developed a unique process for manufacturing of smokeless powder, having individual grains in the form of little round balls. The basic material, nitrocellulose, is the same as the used in older and better known extrusive process. Process, however, is one of the most distinct economical advantage. The nitrocellulose can be obtained either from newly nitrated materials or from surplus cannons and small arms powder. The new process was so safe because the powder is wet from the beginning of the process until the powder grains are dried. Trying to think. Basically, the U.S. military found, ball powder was developed in 1941, and it became like the cheapest and easiest process, and it was safest because ball powder can be from start to finish made wet until it's dried, where with the original tubes, it had to be dried, then pressed, and then cut, and you run the risk of it being cut with and causing a catastrophic issue. So it was a little bit more dangerous. Are Russian Spec Ops still using AKs? Did they update other made types? Spec Ops, to my knowledge, are still using AKs. I think any Russian unit ever still uses AKs, but they use more modern ones. I would say the AK-12, but the AK-12 is kind of dog shit. But they take 74s or AK-12s and they equip them kind of like our Spec Ops do. They have M4s, but they're Block 2s and they're heavily modified to fit whatever mission set they need. So I would assume Russian Spec Ops are still using AKs, but they just Gucci them the fuck up like US Spec Ops do now. Here we go. Frankfurt Arsenal found that the M16 with stick powder had 3.2 malfunctions and 0.75 stoppages for every 1,000 rounds. The same rifles loaded with the Army's generic ball powder faced 18.5 malfunctions and 5.2 stoppages per 1,000 rounds. The same rifle loaded with the despite the clear evidence of the problem created by ball powder, no cleaning kits were sent with M16s to Vietnam. If this wasn't enough, troops were told by ordnance officials that the rifles were self-cleaning and did not need to be lubricated. Which shame on the troops for fucking believing that shit, but I get it. You're told this fancy new gun never needs to be clean, you're gonna fucking believe it. But yeah, it's funny, the tarnished reputation that started in Vietnam about the M16
was all because the Ordnance Department was grumpy that their fucking gun got shit canned by the Secretary of Defense. Let's see. Despite deliberately harm to the reliability of M16, no charges were filed. The M16 would go on to serve until 1988, and then it was replaced by further developments of the basic M16 design. The number of Americans killed due to the shortcomings of the M14 may never be known. Similarly, the numbers lost due to the M16's malfunctions, which were entirely preventable, may never be known. The fact that American soldiers and Marines were sent into battle with small arms known to be faulty is unacceptable. The lessons of Vietnam for small arms is that long-range aimed fire is not viable alternative to fire superiority. For the infantry to accomplish its mission to close with and destroy the enemy, it must have ability to produce sufficient volumes of fire even down to the individual soldier. So basically, this is going to be 50 years, they came back to the same conclusion that more rounds downrange matter far better than having a rifle that's super accurate and heavy caliber. It's a bit of a fucking shame that it took that long. But whatever. If we talk about GWAT to now, post-Vietnam refinements of the M16A1 resulted in the M16A2. This version, with a heavier barrel for greater sustained fire rate, improved iron sights, and better ergonomics. The M16A2 was adopted by the Army in 1986 and has since received further upgrades, culminating in the optics-mountable M16A4, which I was issued back in the Marine Corps. The final version of the M16 continues to see service across the world and in limited capacity in U.S. service as of April 2025. Which, yeah, I was in back in 2018, and the M16A4 was like still standard issue in Marine Corps infantry, and M4s weren't even the equipped force-wide. The M16A1 had already been shortened for use by special operations units in Vietnam, and in 1994, the M16A2 was similarly shortened for a new purpose. Much as the M1 carbine had been issued to rear echelon troops and support troops in World War II, the original intent of the M4 was to create an even lighter and more compact version of the M16A2 for issue alongside regular rifles. The M4 experienced battle for the first time for the operations in Kosovo back in 1999. Battlefield successes and popularity with soldiers led to the increased adoption of the M4, especially as the global war on terror accelerated. The increase of close quarters fighting during opening years of the GWAT led to Army officials adopting M4 as its primary service rifle back in 2005. While the compact carbine had many advantages, the need for sustained fire to achieve fire superiority remained. In 2011, the Army began converting M4s to the newer M4A1 model as a part of the production improvement program. Upgrades included a heavier barrel for better heat dissipation, a full auto trigger group instead of the shitty 3-round burst, which, fuck that 3-round burst, that thing sucked ass. If you activated, so how it works is it's just a mechanical ratchet inside of the gun, and if you were shooting semi-auto and you shot 1 to 2 rounds into the ratchet and then you switched to to burst fire, your first burst would be 1 round to 2 rounds, and then it would stop, and then you'd have to reset the trigger to shoot the next 3 rounds. And if you like shortchanged the gun or there was some sort of hiccup, it would only shoot 1 to 2 rounds. It was fucking unreliable as shit and very inconsistent. The burst was a waste of fucking time and effort. I don't know why the U.S. military did that. I get it. It was to save ammunition, but like I could still hammer through a 30-round magazine in semi pretty quickly, and just having the full auto capability would have been way more better than this whole 3-round concept that the military came up with back in the day. It was such a fucking waste of time. But where was I? Full auto groups. Alongside the new rifle, the Army began issuing magnified optics as standard issue in 2007, which the Trijicon ACOG, which that thing is fucking goated. If you never had one or never shot one, if it was like the end of the world and you could have only one optic that made sense, I would take an ACOG over everything, because you can shoot out to distance if you need to, but yet it can still work in close quarters environments, and it's etched glass, so there's no batteries, there's no need for anything. So if like that thing is indestructible. I've only ever broken one and I broke the rear glass on one because it just of an impact, and it was so particular that it was impossible to reproduce. Further accessory packages included the AN PEQ series of laser aiming modules. So the PEC 15, or back then it was the PEC 2, and nowadays we use the PEC 15 or the PEC 16, which the 15 is better than the 16, in my opinion. The individual infantryman now had the ability to engage targets with greater clarity and precision even during night operations, which, fucking Fallujah, when the Marine Corps started getting issued ACOGs, like, force-wide, they had to do an internal investigation to make sure that the Marine Corps wasn't executing people because there were so many fucking headshots because they were so accurate. It was pretty impressive. I highly recommend looking into that. Like the adoption of the ACOG, it was the greatest decision the Marine Corps or the military ever did, was adopting a magnified optic for, force wide, because it just improves your lethality and your ability to hit out to distance and accurately. Because I don't know about you, but my eyes suck, and when I try and shoot at distance using my eyes, I fucking can't see shit. I got lucky, and when I was in the Marine Corps, I could shoot out to 500 with iron sights, but it was still harder to do than with an ACOG. With a magnified optic, it's like fucking easy. Why would we not make that kind of option easier for the guys on the ground? But to each their own, right? Whatever. The individual infantryman now had the ability to gauge targets with greater clarity and precision even during night. I've already read that. These upgrades did add weight to the system. The M4A1 weighed 7.5 pounds when loaded, but the fundamental ability to achieve battlefield fire superiority through volume was not lost. So, a 7.5 pound rifle. The 1917 Enfield bolt-action rifle from World War I was, I think it was 8.5 pounds. So, a fully automatic M4A1 is still a pound lighter than the World War I era bolt-action rifle, and you have the greater fire superiority. You still have good ballistic advantage at distance. Why would we not do that, Of equal significance were changes made to the U.S. Army and Marine Corps' respective marksmanship training philosophies. Adopted in 2019, after I left. The Army's current marksmanship qualifications require soldiers to rapidly change magazines, adjust shooting posture, and engage pop-up targets from 25 to 300 meters. The Marine Corps has gone even further in development of realistic marksmanship training. The annual rifle qualification was adopted October of 2021, which, again, well after I left the Marine Corps, but whatever. And requires Marines to shoot while wearing full combat gear. They did that before that. Engage moving targets. In the infantry, we did that. I don't know about the fucking pogues. And while utilizing barricades. Additional changes to both Army and Marine qualifications are ongoing, with even greater focus on realistic combat scenarios and shooting skills. Which, that's honestly a really good choice instead of the static, standing, kneeling, sitting, prone, rifle, slow shooting. That serves a purpose to develop the fundamentals of marksmanship, but combat shooting and having the understanding and knowledge and capability of doing it comes from doing it, and it doesn't happen in the military, and that's what sucks. So, I get it, but I'm glad we're making those changes now because we need to do it later. Or better than doing it later. However, combat experiences in Afghanistan created concerns about the ability of an individual squad to engage targets at distance. American troops were being engaged well outside a typical rifle range, at distances greater than 500 meters. The small, high-velocity 5.56x45 ammunition was having limited effect at this distance. Which, no shit, it's outside of its intended purpose, it's not going to do well. That's like saying, I'm going to use a 50 cal for fucking CQB. That doesn't make sense. So to criticize the M16 M4s for not being effective in Afghanistan when the average engagement distance is greater than the average intended ballistic range, yeah, no shit. But instead of completely upending the entire military infrastructure and small arms infrastructure, why don't you just adapt to that issue, which at the time in Afghanistan we did. Everyone was going out mounted, so you had M2s and M249s and DMRs and all this shit, which DMRs are a thing for a reason, and so are in-place machine guns, support by fire, artillery, all these other things fill the gap to get the infantry to the engagement distance needed to close with and destroy the enemy. So, I don't know, criticizing the M16 for not being capable after 500 meters in Afghanistan is fucking stupid. Medium machine guns like 7.62 NATO, specialized snipers, indirect guided munitions were able to close this gap in lethality. There you go. Most significantly, a specialized role was added to each squad to produce additional standoff ranks, the designated marksman. Officially introduced in the Army in 2002, the roles of designated marksmen is to engage enemies' automatic rifle teams, anti-tank team snipers using precision fire. The concept of a DMR specific roles are not new. Soviet Union did it with the SVD and the Dragunov in the 60s. The M4 and M16 were not built to do this. No shit. They were designed for 300 and in, 500 and in, not for anything further. Now, can a 5.56 hit past 500? Yes, but it doesn't have the ballistic knockdown effect that you need, which is why DMRs were made, and they just literally used old M14s. That's what the M14 EBR is. It was the first DMR. Even with modifications, the M14 did not have the performance required for extended precision engagements. Further iterations attempted to use heavily modified M16s for the role. The Army has since fielded the M110 or the M110A1, which is a 308 7.62 by 51 AR-15, which is a semi-automatic rifle capable of engaging at distance. That's fucking perfect. Despite the introduction of a new class of rifle meant for intermediate engagements, concern remained over the ability of the individual infantryman to engage targets beyond 500 meters. There was also a concern about the ability of the 5.56 round to produce sufficient terminal effects on enemy combatants, aka they're concerned that it can't knock a motherfucker down. By the mid-2010s, it was also apparent that the United States no longer had a monopoly on general issue body armor to soldiers. Could the 5.56 ammunition be effective on battlefield where body armor was commonly used by adversaries? So, yes, there's more of a general issue of body armor like China and Russia, but even now, as we're looking at with the Ukraine war, Russians are going, like, they're running out of shit. Like, they did not have the stockpile that this article is saying was needed to, which is why we adopted the M7. Like, it's to defeat near pure body armor. Like, look at Iran. Iran didn't even have universally issued body armor unless you're a special forces guy. And we're about to go to fucking war with them, and they were the 12th biggest army in the world. And if you look at, like, China and Russia, which is 2 and 3, sure, there's a more prolific use of body armor, but even Russia is at the point in the Ukraine war where most guys aren't wearing body armor. They're rolling like fucking Temu shit because they can't get the equipment they need. So, I don't know. I think that's a fucking dumb argument to change the entire fucking military doctrine over the chance of body armor being present in a battlefield. So the Next Generation Squad Weapon Program was introduced to find and field new weapon systems for the infantry. New calibers, service rifles, light machine guns, and optics were tested to produce replacements for systems already in service. The NGSW program was a result of several decades of similar programs that had similar desired outcomes. For example, the lessons learned from 2002's XMA program likely impacted the initial goals of the NGSW, which the XMA program, the only thing that came out of it was the XM25, which ended up being thrown out anyways. So the U.S. military wasted. Where did you find the boom stick Mauser? It was not inherited, but I bought it off a old neighbor who didn't want it anymore. Initial requirements for the rifles completing in the NGSW program exceeded the classification and distribution of this project and have therefore been omitted. I don't care about that part. That's just fucking pure nonsense bullshit. So nice, love it, dude. I do too. I've never shot it though. It's in 7.92, or it's in that Mauser caliber pistol that I can't acquire, and I kind of don't want to blow it up either. The NGSW program was expected to produce a rifle with greater terminal ballistic capability than the M4A1. The new rifle would also be expected to perform in a variety of environments. DTO&E states that operational environments may range from known, traditional, or conventional regional environments to an unknown complex environment, such as international megacity encompassing complex urban terrain. Ultimately, 3 rifles were submitted for final consideration. The 3 rifles submitted for the final selection were represented in 3 varying levels of technological advancement. Sig Sauer submitted the XM5. It was later changed to the XM7 due to some lawsuits. The hybrid steel brass case version of the 6.8 by 51. The General Dynamics submitted the RM277, which was a bullpup designed using polymer cased ammunition. And Textron submitted a CT5, which is a fully caseless design using 6.8mm projectiles. The XM7 represented the most conservative approach to the program requirements, while CT5 represented the most sophisticated solution. The RM277 polymers case system represented a combination of new and familiar technology. Also SICK 1911. Not a 1911, it's a Browning high power. Browning high powers are cooler, if you ask me. While the exact test performance of each system is classified, the final outcome was the Sig Sauer XM7, which is a fucking shame. The XM7 rifle uses a barrel that is 13 inches in length, 1.5 inches shorter than the M4A1's 14.5. This is significant because the barrel length directly impacts the velocity, heat, and chamber pressure characteristics of a weapon system. The following diagram will provide greater clarity of relationship between these variables. And we have a fancy diagram, which, I don't know, it's kind of dumb, but I'll show you what they're talking about. It's basically the pressure peaks based on traveling inside a barrel. So bottom axis 0 through 14 is how long it spends in the barrel, and left axis is pressure. And basically you have a greater velocity the more time you spend in the barrel. And once it exits, it drops off significantly, the pressure. So XM7's relatively short barrel is combined with the muzzle velocity requirements of greater than 3,000 feet per second. This means that, Browning high power 45 ACP or 380, it's a 9mm. This means that to achieve greater velocity, the XM7 must also create higher pressures. Traditional brass case ammunition cannot be safely used in a system with such high pressures, leading to the creation of a proprietary steel-brass hybrid case. Higher peak pressures require stronger and heavier components to maintain safety and reliability. Higher peak pressures also increase the risk of parts wearing out quickly. Higher muzzle exit pressures make the weapon louder and may require the usage of a suppressor to maintain acceptable noise and blast exposure. The need to always install suppressors negates the benefits of size, weight, that the shorter barrel intended to provide. So basically what he's arguing is, yeah, it came out with a shorter barrel, which is fucking nice, but also cutting the barrel that much with a casing that high in pressure is kind of fucking dumb, because you're limping the round. If it spent more time in the barrel, it can gain more velocity and be more impactful at distance. And then using that, if you've ever shot a short-barreled AR-15 indoors, which I have, it'll rock your fucking world. Shooting a 10-inch fucking AR indoors without a can is like letting little mini flashbangs go off, and holy shit is it loud. So I can't imagine CQB with an XM7 without a can is any better. It's probably worse because it's higher pressures. Do I got time? What time is it? It's 2:35. I'll give it like 10 more minutes. Yeah, alright, I'll give it like 10 more minutes, but I'll just stop reading now. If you got questions, ask them. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. Like, shoot me. Robert was asking about the Browning high power. The Browning high power is a 9mm. It's you know, John Moses Browning's final design that he didn't even finish before he died. It was ended up being finished by... I forgot who it was finished by. But it was finished later after he died, and that is basically the final overall design that John Moses Browning created. And it's a pretty fucking sick gun. It's structured a lot like a 1911, external hammer, external safety. There's no grip safety, which is really nice. I do appreciate that. But yeah, I actually really enjoy Browning high power shooting it. It was my grandfather's, and I inherited it. It's a phenomenal gun. Highly recommend it. But yeah. So, I would love to show off guns. I just can't. It's a sick gun, though. I thought it was a 1911 45. No, I don't have a 1911. I do have a 2011. I have a Staccato P around here, but I used to have a 1911. I got rid of it. Forgot to charge my phone. Don't allow. So, ask questions. What do you guys have? Because happy to answer anything. I'm just gonna kind of give it 10 more minutes before I gotta go because I'm fucking sweating my balls off in my workshop. It's, wait for it, 90 fucking degrees in here. And I do this for you. But anyways, my next video plan is I'm going to kind of go over and read that whole report in the video. But I want to talk more about kind of my thoughts and opinions on it all. It'll be a long one, though. That'll be the downside. Which, the question is, will anyone stick around to watch it? But what would you guys want to see in a video? How about that? Big and bulky to carry every day, so I carry a Smith & Wesson 38 Combat Masterpiece 6-inch barrel. Like a revolver? So Robert, you carry a Smith & Wesson 38 revolver? Or is that a... Oh, I mean, fucking good for you, but I would not want to carry a revolver nowadays. I mean, they're, end of the day, indestructible, and that's pretty fucking cool. But I don't know. I mean, what's wrong with modern day semi-automatics? Like, I carry a Smith & Wesson Shield Plus, and that's 14 rounds of 9mm, which is, and it's, that gun is a little bit bigger than my fucking hand, and I can carry it anywhere I go. And I've still shot out to like 100 yards with it when I need to. This gun's getting old. But, anyways, unless anyone's got something, I think I might just call it in a couple minutes. But tell me what you all think about, fuck, I don't know. I feel kind of dumb. I'm kind of drawing a blank. Been talking for 107 minutes, drawing a blank here.
So, Robert, do you even own a gun that's made before the 1860? Yes, sir. I would say a boomer joke, but I am playing with a 1903 Springfield right now. But I'd love to show it, but I can't because I would get the stream pulled down instantly. Alright, well, I will say I'm kind of a 30-06. Hell yeah. Speaking of 30-06, 30-06. This 1903 has an issue where it doesn't like feeding the second to last round in the magazine. All right. Oh. I love military guns. My dad carried a .38 Combat Master in Vietnam. It was my dad's. It shoots better than any new gun I think I have. That's... Alright, I'll give it to you. That's kind of cool. I mean, the reason why that Browning High Power is important to me is it was my grandfather's gun he carried when he was a cop in Chicago. So, I mean, I get it. And that Browning High Power is fucking cool as shit. I'd carry it if I could. But finding anything to carry it with is the problem. Alright. That's badass. Thanks. I think I'm gonna call it. I'm sick of sweating my ass off in this hot ass shed. But I'll start cranking out the video stuff tomorrow. I'm about to take a long break because I'm going out on a vacation and stuff, so don't be surprised if videos take a while to come out, but I've got plenty of time to answer comments and questions and do whatever. I have a GWAT 22 in my car. That's the one at 45, right? But if you're looking for anything like book recommendations on gun stuff, I've got close to like 100 books in here on just guns alone. But till then, I'm gonna go get to choring before my wife kills me. Boys, have a good night. I'm gonna get out of here and I'll start getting to work tomorrow. 40 cal. Ew, gross. Get with the times. I'll save my rant on 40 cal for another day. But, yeah, any questions or anything, you guys can stick around for more. Subscribe. I'll start cranking out more videos later. You guys have a good night, all right? We'll catch y'all later.